We go through life, and then life literally kicks us in the butt and throws us all of these curveballs. And then we think like, oh, now is the time that I should be, going to see a therapist, or now is the time that I need to talk to myself more gently, when this is something that you should be managing every single day. Once you are high functioning and you've accomplished so much and you have a thriving business or whatever that accomplishment looks like to you, you have to maintain that. And so the maintenance sometimes on these high level activities can be a lot of pressure.
Hey friends, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the epidemic no one is talking about, the psychological price of entrepreneurship. Now, Forbes calls depression an epidemic among entrepreneurs and creatives. They actually did a study at UC Berkeley, and they found that 72% of entrepreneurs reported mental health concern, and they are 3 times more likely to suffer from depression than an average person. Now, if you've ever tried to start something, even if it's not a startup, any project, or just try to make money on your own, you probably know what I'm talking about. It is hard on top. It is so lonely to go at it alone. And the worst part is sometimes you actually have no one to talk to. It's often a silent struggle because in a society that often doesn't give us a lot of permission to be vulnerable, to be completely honest, a lot of people don't want to be seen as weak. And so everyone is silently struggling alone. So what is really going on here? And how can we stay mentally healthy wherever you are on your entrepreneur journey? That's why we've invited Kiaundra Jackson, Forbes Next 100. She's a licensed marriage and family therapist, award-winning speaker, and best-selling author. She's featured in Oprah's magazine and Oprah's network OWN. Even Beyonce knows Kiaundra. You can learn more about her in the link below. Hey, Kiaundra, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here with you today.
I'm so glad to have you here. Now, before we kick things off, I gotta know, how do you know Beyonce?
I love this question because everyone wants to know. So Beyonce actually teamed up with the NAACP to recognize people who were doing great work in the communities and had really great businesses. And so out of 17,000 people, Beyonce chose me to be a part of her Be Good Fund, which is a fund where she really helps people expand their impact and their reach. And so I was chosen, and I was surprised. I almost died and came back to life 20 times because it's Beyonce, right? And it's the NAACP.
I would too.
Yeah, and so it came with a really great check as well. And so Beyonce knows how to put, her money where her mouth is to really support causes. And so I was just so excited and continue to be astounded by the work that she does and how she supports people who are trying to get their message out in a larger way.
Get their message out in a larger way. So what did you do? What are you doing to get on her radar? Like, who are you right now? How does she know you?
Yeah, I try to stay humble these days, but I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also, like you mentioned, am a best-selling author. I have 5 books under my belt. I am a media personality. I am an award-winning speaker. I do a lot of great work around mental health and healthy relationships. I've been featured in countless magazines. Just so many things in the community. And so I think just me operating in my zone of genius and me doing the things that I'm passionate about has helped people to see the great work that I do, and they really want to acknowledge and recognize that.
I love it. You're doing and it's just like a message that's so important to share too, because you didn't start from here, did you? How did you get into the whole therapy and mental health and relationships biz?
I did not start from here at all. As what Drake says, started from the bottom, now we're here. Like, that is literally where I started, from the bottom. I actually grew up in Compton, California, which we know is not known for the best things. There's a lot of violence and homelessness and gangs and all of these things. And so I grew up there, and just at the age of about 10 years old, my parents got divorced. And so around that time, that same exact time, my sister got pregnant at 16. And so my household was just very chaotic. There was a lot of physical and verbal and emotional abuse going on. And so my world was literally just shifted and turned upside down almost overnight,
Yeah.
at a very early age. And so I just realized that if I could technically successfully get through all of the trauma and the struggles and the financial issues that we experienced, and all of those things, unhealthy relationship patterns, that I should be able to help other people navigate that space as well. And so I just went on this crazy personal and professional mission to like help people have better mental health, help people have healthier relationships, whether that is romantic or non-romantic. And it really has been up from there. And so I really do start from humble beginnings. And that's what keeps me so level headed when all of these accolades and successes come my way.
I love that because it's like your past and the traumas that you went through and overcoming that, those are like the breadcrumbs to your purpose that's like led you that way. And it's beautiful because it's like you're not just learning about it, you went through it. And that makes you so much more able to empathize with what's actually going through with your clients and who you're working with, right?
Absolutely. And, even to just add a little bit more meat to that, I grew up in a space where not only did my parents, get divorced, but I didn't even see healthy relationships in my own home, within my family, within my greater community, within my church, any of those things. And so everyone was like married or divorced, or no one really talked about mental health, or it was just pray it away. All of those stigmas that we experience in communities of color, it was very prevalent in my life. And so I just knew, I'm like, it's not supposed to be this way, and I don't want this for other people. And so if I can have a hand in impacting other people's lives in a unique way, I definitely want to do that.
I love what you said there, that there's like a stigma, like especially within in the Black community, even in the Asian community, it's so taboo. And we were saying, I was speaking before, like there's so many, and we'll get into it, but there's so many people struggling alone, because it's taboo. People don't feel safe to even talk about these things, and nowhere did we ever learn how to model, like where did we get the models of relationships from? Where did we ever learn from them if we don't have them in our own homes? And so it's like you're taking this out into the world. And well, we're gonna get right into it, but it's no wonder we're seeing such a mass rate of depression and mental health, like at a decline from all over the place, even if you see successful people out there.
Absolutely, 100%. There's so many stigmas in communities of color. And, it takes people like me and others to really break those stigmas down and really normalize and say it's okay to seek help. Some of the strongest people seek help because it's really not a weakness, it's actually a strength.
And that's kind of where you've gone from your one-to-one clientele, and now you're doing more personality and TV work. Tell me a little bit more of that, like what shifted for you to like now go out there into the world and spread your message?
I love that so much because it's been a crazy journey, to be honest with you. I mean, I've had a thriving private practice in the Los Angeles, California area for years. And so I did a lot of one-on-one work with individuals and couples and families and things of that nature. But I've always felt this calling to really impact the masses, to go from that one-on-one work to like a one-to-many model. And so being in the limelight and being able to be featured in articles and do a lot of television and write books and things of that nature, it allows me to touch people that I've never would have been able to touch any other way. Like when I get emails from people all the way literally from India, saying I read your book and it changed my life, I probably would have never been able to meet that person. And so being able to just kind of take that one-on-one model and expand it through different modes and different mediums have been a game changer for me. And I get to impact more people, but with the same passion and purpose and desire that I had when I work with people one-on-one.
I love that. I also think that there's a raise in this movement, as well as more therapists go out and you have Instagram channels and stuff like that. What I love about it is like it's shaping culture, because when you change media, you change stories, and those stories affect culture. And then all of a sudden you have proper representation, and all of a sudden, you have permission to be seen, and those dialogues and awareness is being spread too, because it's not like in the confines of like a school or in a one-on-one therapy office. Now it's like out in the open and people are talking about it. Everyone knows about it now, right? So I love that.
It changes the game for everyone, and I think just people seeing diverse backgrounds and people who come from all different walks of life and being real and honest about their journeys and being experts in this space at the same time, I think it does something. Like, I love the fact that people are drawn to me because I am a Black millennial, have amazing hair, relatable. I have a really unique story and I'm not afraid to share that whole journey with people. And so people see me as very relatable. They're like, oh my gosh, she's really cool, but she's also very knowledgeable and can really help you at the same exact time. So I love the fact that there's a new breed of creators, of therapists, business owners that are really rising up and just shifting culture.
Yeah, I love that. Now for some real talk about that as an entrepreneur yourself and a founder who's gone through things. Let's talk about something that is quite actually an epidemic that happens because as the rise of these people, more people becoming creators, more people being entrepreneurs, we start facing a lot more mental health problems. And it's one of those big lies out there where when you become a creator or an entrepreneur, you're just going to succeed and it's just going to be that easy of a cake. Yeah, what do you have? You're shaking your head. You want to say something?
I have so much to say, but it really boils down to none of this is easy. Especially when you come from a background where there aren't any business people or entrepreneurs, or no one has paved the way for you, no one has given you the gems, or no one has tossed the baton back to you to show you the way. It's really trial and error, and so even from just a personal perspective, I've gone through so much personally, my own mental health challenges. I struggle with anxiety. I'm very much open to talk about that on a regular basis. Like, people think that because you're a therapist or because you're successful, you don't have these struggles, but we're no different than anyone else. We have all of the exact same struggles that other people have. And it's kind of hard because even though you're experiencing some of these things, you still have a desire to push forward and keep being great and keep doing things and go to the next level. And sometimes we don't realize that we have to take a step back and really maintain our own mental health on a regular basis in order to continue to be successful.
People have to maintain their mental health on a daily basis. So that brings into a question is like, what is it that everyone's kind of getting wrong here when it comes to protecting their mental health?
Yeah, it really boils down to what I just said. People think that they can pretend or not manage their mental health on a daily basis. So what happens is we go through life, and then life literally kicks us in the butt and throws us all of these curveballs. And then we think like, oh, now is the time that I should be, going to see a therapist, or now is the time that I need to talk to myself more gently, or now is the time that I should be, sharing my thoughts and feelings, when this is something that you should be managing every single day. And I have a friend who broke this down so beautifully recently. He talked about how really what mental health is how our external world interacts with our internal world, And so it's really powerful because when those two things collide, as they always will, how do you manage life when the good, bad, and in between continues to happen?
The internal and the external world collide. And we are not, it's like we medicate ourselves. It's like I always see this as a medicated culture. Like we are always on a recovery. There's like on mode and then recovery mode. There's no in between. There's no like, how do I actually manage this? It's kind of like when you brush your teeth every single day. You maintain like a dental hygiene, but we don't do any like mental health hygiene.
Absolutely. I liken it to like a car,
Yeah.
Right? We put all of the things in place. We get our oil change, we get our brakes done, we get our shocks or, all of these things done on our car as far as maintenance, right? Because we know that if we don't do those things, our car will eventually break down, And so I liken our mental health to the same exact thing. We have to take preventative measures to keep things going as far as maintenance. So when life does happen, we have a protective factor that can actually help us. And so it is just like that dentist. You have to brush your teeth and floss and do all of those things in between. So when you do get to the dentist, she can say, job well done.
That's great. I think we'll get into what those actually looks like, what you can be doing to be, so to speak, tuning up your car, brushing your teeth here. I wanted to get into the fact that there's so many high functioning people out there, yourself included. Thank you for sharing. That was very vulnerable of you. That face depression and anxiety and a whole like conglomerate of other kinds of mental health issues. Uh, why do you think that's happening? Like, what do you think is really going on there, especially for those who are really high functioning?
Yeah, there's a lot of us who are high functioning, which basically means that we're able to keep a facade up. We're able to do all of the normal things that we would normally do. If you're a partner, you can, tend to your partner. If you have children, you can go to work. You can look like on the outside that everything is absolutely perfect and fine, but internally your world is shifting and changing, and you could literally be falling apart in front of other people's eyes and they wouldn't even know it, just because you look so well on the outside. And I think this is definitely something that a lot of people struggle with, because we live in a space where comparison is really at the height of it all. And so we look at other people, other celebrities, other people in our communities and our network, and we see them doing so good, our social media as well. We see them doing so good on the outside. They have the money, they have the spouse, they have the children, they have the $1 million or whatever they're pretending to have. And we want that. We want to emulate that. But at the same time, we don't know what it costs that person to get there. And we also don't know what really goes on behind closed doors. And so we spend all of our time trying to reach this comparison and try to be like other people, when it's really detrimental to our own self. And so I like to encourage people to just be real. I call myself a realist, like I struggle with anxiety. I've never experienced depression before, but my anxiety is real, and those moments where I feel like it's overtaking me, it's important to know that it's okay to feel those feelings. I don't have to push them aside. I don't have to pretend like I'm okay when I'm really not. It's really about being honest. And I remember I was honest with someone recently when they checked in on me, and they couldn't even handle it because
there's like, wait, all these emotions.
Yeah, they were so used to me saying, "Oh, I'm okay. Yeah. I'm good. No worries. Things are great." But when I was like, "Wow, life is kicking me in the butt right now, and all of these things are happening, and I just don't know what's going to happen next," and they were just like shook. They didn't even know how to receive that. So sometimes on the opposite end as well, it's hard for people to receive your truthfulness and your honesty when you have been hiding it so well for so long. So it's important for us to be honest about what we're going through, because it can really impact and help other people along the way.
Why do you think this happens so much? Because there are some people who are not high functioning at all. Like they're depressed and they're down. And there's some people who just live on with it day to day. I'm almost at the concern thinking that it's harder for those who are high functioning, because there's more numbing that's happening, because they're not accepting the emotions. They're jerking on with it, and then maybe potentially burning out. I don't know. That's just a curiosity there.
No, that's a great observation. I also think it's the pressure, right? Like once you are high functioning and you've accomplished so much and you have a thriving business or whatever that accomplishment looks like to you, you have to maintain that, And so the maintenance sometimes on these high level activities can be a lot of pressure. And so when you are not able to maintain in a healthy manner, people are going to look at you crazy. Like, what do you mean you don't have this? Or what do you mean this is happening to you? And so we just push ourselves beyond the limits. And like you mentioned, it really does lead to burnout. Yeah. And you don't ever want to be in a place where you are burning out, because you tend to lose your fire, you tend to lose your purpose, and you kind of set yourself back a little bit instead of just taking those breaks as needed along the way and along the journey.
What do you think is the root cause of all of this? Especially for entrepreneurs to put this off the side and be high functioning. Like, what is the deeply, if we were to like lift the curtain here, what's really going on inside of their heads and their hearts?
To be honest, I think it's trauma.
Yeah.
And it's that looks very differently for every person. But I know, just sharing a little bit about my backstory and how I grew up, that's a lot of the driving force of why I have anxiety, because my world fell apart so young, right? So now I'm able, or I'm trying to control everything that I know how to control. And sometimes I do that to excess, right? And so that's what that looks like for me, but that can look very differently for another entrepreneur. So I would say that it's some deep rooted trauma that probably happened very early on in their childhood that needs to be uncovered and addressed. And that will probably start to help alleviate some of the symptoms currently when you deal with everything that you needed to deal with from your past.
And that's so interesting because it's like so many people almost like that trauma almost serves them to a certain point for them to be such an overachiever, to be such a high functioning person, to use that anxiety as like that energy to push that much further. To a point that sometimes it's just at their own detriment, and then people don't realize that. They don't see that because they don't know it's rooted in something else, right?
Absolutely. That's why we see so many celebrities and entertainers and people, push themselves beyond the limit, to literal physical exhaustion. And they're, in the hospital or whatever because no one told them, and they had no one there to say, hey, you need to chill out a little bit. Hey, you need to slow down. Hey, you're doing too much. Hey, have you checked in with your therapist? And we just drive people like to no end without breaks and without checking in to see if people are really okay. And it really does like mess them up long term. And so we can see so many celebrities and people out there who experience depression, who've died by suicide because, there's money doesn't mean anything. Like you can have all the money in the world, all the fame, all the notoriety, all of the accolades. But if you don't have that internal peace, right? None of that means anything.
Yeah. Anthony Bourdain, Kate Spade, Elon Musk came out with like saying he's bipolar. It's quite an epidemic. I think it's harder as well because like you just said, like when you're on top, everyone relies on you and you've been high functioning and responsible this whole time. It's like when everyone's relying on you, do you feel safe to break down? Do you feel safe to tell people like, no, I'm suffering inside? It's like it's your own cage, your own prison that you've kind of created. And that's, wow. It's no wonder that they found the studies that like entrepreneurs are 3 times more likely to be depressed than the average person.
Absolutely. Right? And we see why. We understand why, because there's just so much pressure. And trying to alleviate that pressure sometimes is hard when you don't have a supportive community around you, or if you're not surrounded by other entrepreneurs or people who understand, right? They just say, oh, push through, you'll be okay, it's fine, no big deal, you've been doing this your whole life, you're successful, when none of that matters. Sometimes we just want to be careless in a good way and not have all the responsibilities and just kind of relax and take that load off. But you don't have the space and the opportunity to do that in most cases.
No, you don't. And I think something we touched on before, you were saying comparison is often a driving force of this. What do you have to say about like the deeper parts of that comparison? Because I think a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome, and that is a lot of it is comparing with other people and just not feeling good enough. And so you don't feel good enough, you're just going to keep trying to prove yourself, but there is no enough if you don't actually feel enough, right?
Absolutely. And that's why it's important to go to therapy. I wouldn't be a therapist if I did not tell everyone listening today, make sure that you find a good therapist that is a fit for you, because imposter syndrome will definitely pop up. Like even when you get to higher levels of success, it loves to rear its little head and, put on your shoulder or whisper in your ear and say like, you're not good enough. Nobody's going to listen to you. You're not an expert. Absolutely not. You're never going to be successful. Those thoughts and those feelings pop up all the time. But if you do not have that inner strength, that wherewithal to combat that with, oh no, evidence, right? There's evidence that says counter, then you're going to let that consume you, you know? And so I've had instances like that in my own personal life where I've struggled with imposter syndrome. And literally, I can think of a time when I was about to go on national television. It's a show that has literally millions of viewers every single day. And I was like, all of a sudden, I was like, I can't do this. I'm going to suck. No one's going to listen to me. I'm going to look ugly. Like I had all of these weird, crazy thoughts happening. And so I called a friend who's a part of my emotional support system, and I talked to him, and he was like, okay, first of all, you've done TV a million times. Like, why is this even a thing for you? And he started really combating all of those negative thoughts with truths, right? And showing me the evidence, like, you deserve this. Like, you are meant for this. You have worked your behind off for this very moment. And so don't let that inner dialogue, that inner negative dialogue, pull you away from what you're supposed to do. Like you're going to go out there and you're going to kill it and it's going to be great. And so after that, I felt better. But no matter where you are on your journey, those moments will definitely try to pop up. And it's important for you to have systems in place, people in place, things that you can tell yourself to kind of like get you back on track.
So would you say self-talk is the key to overcoming imposter syndrome and challenging challenging your thoughts with evidence is what I think you said happened. Is there any other?
Absolutely. Yeah, the positive self talk, people probably think that's a little woo woo, like that doesn't work, but it does. It works when you have statements and you have, yeah, statements where you can utilize them in those very moments to combat those negative thoughts. And so I have a friend who specializes in imposter syndrome, and he talks about like, evidence, like there's no possible way that the whole entire world can think that I suck when Beyonce has recognized my business out of 17,000 other people, and so just giving yourself and having other people give you those facts back is really helpful in the moment. So it isn't just, I am great, I'm going to do great, I'm beautiful. Those are great, but you also need to have some evidence that's going to help really boost up your self-esteem and to get you to that next level so you won't, wallow and drown in that imposter syndrome. And then that could potentially, pull you back from doing anything moving forward, that you're supposed to do.
Right. And that's like, I would say that like adds to all of the anxiety on top of it. If I don't belong here and you're telling yourself all these negative thoughts, because I think the truth is if you tell your brain anything, it's biased. Like it will just find, it's like a heat seeking missile. It's like, if you think it's going to suck, you'll find evidence it's going to suck. And if you think it's going to be great, you're going to find evidence that it's going to be great. Right. So why not
Absolutely.
find the good evidence and have a support system is something else I really heard. So it's really important to have a support system. What do you say for the people who don't have one and they don't have anyone to talk to? How would they go about looking for a support system?
I think there are a lot of people who may not have a true support system, but most of us can find at least one person. And it doesn't have to be, when I say support system, it doesn't have to be 20 people. It doesn't have to be 15. It can just be that one core person that gets you, whether that's a coworker, a family member, a childhood friend, someone you met at your faith-based church, wherever it is for you. Just find one person. And I think once you find that one person, that can be your support system. It doesn't have to be a large group of people. And so you just want somebody who shows empathy, who's understanding, who's supportive, who's going to hold you accountable, who's going to be strong when you're weak, or, when you're experiencing moments of weakness, who can carry you, who can protect your secrets, who can encourage you. That's really what you're looking for in a support system. And so if you're finding that the people around you are the complete opposite of that, well, it's time to reevaluate your circle. It's time to put people and move some people out, get those people out of here and replace those people with the good, the people who's really going to have your back through thick and thin.
I love that. Seems to be like a theme here. There's mental health and then there's the people around you, because you've mentioned a few times, you mentioned your friends and your friends and who you sought help from. And it really comes down to, the people around you, your relationships, the people in your life.
Absolutely.
So would you say
And
that's like,
even even as a business owner or an entrepreneur, if you can find someone who's also a part of your support system that is an entrepreneur who actually has that extra, that they can get it and understand, I think that that just adds so much more, you know, power to the situation and to the dynamic. Thankfully, the people who I'm referring to, they're also entrepreneurs, so they understand the struggle, and that is really what helps me be able to rely on them, and then they can rely on me as well.
whoever is looking for a community should definitely think about starting a community for entrepreneurs to just like have a support system for each other.
Yes, entrepreneur support group. That's what
Oh,
that's
that's what
what
we
we
need.
need.
Yeah. Something that is super big, and I think like we've touched on this before. Something that I think is really big in both depression and anxiety, because then so we have those people who are high functioning, they get depressed, and a lot of them are anxious at the time, and they're facing a lot of burnout. Sorry, a lot of imposter syndrome, right? And that forces them to push them so much harder just because you're in comparison, and there's no bar because you're always comparing yourself with the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and it's never enough. You're just never going to meet the Joneses because the Jones keep going up, and it always ends up leading to this big epidemic. This is like all one big epidemic. It's the culture of burnout. This is something you see a lot in entrepreneurs and just high achievers in general. And I think you wanted to talk about this, and like, what do you think about burnout culture, and how do you think we can do better?
Yeah, burnout culture is real. I mean, it has been perpetuated in our society, on social media, in our personal lives. I mean, for years, right? But I think it's really coming to the forefront. And I think the pandemic and everything that we went through has really pushed it more so into the forefront, because even with us shifting the way we work and being able to work from home and seeing that there are moments where we don't have to overdo it and that we need a break and that we need to pull back. I think a lot of people are coming to that realization, but I'm also seeing a shift with like self-care culture too. I don't know if I'm on TikTok or Instagram too much, but I'm seeing a rise in people saying, hey, like, it's okay to take a break. Hey, it's okay to not have your house super duper clean 24/7. It's okay to take a nap. It's okay to do all of these things, because when you push past your limit, you really do burn out. And when you burn out, you're no good to anyone else. You're no good to your children. You're no good to your spouse. You're no good to your employees. You're no good to the clients that you serve. And so understanding that you have to take breaks is so important. I do this thing called Self Care Friday every single Friday, where I literally do absolutely, positively zero work. I mean, no emails, no nothing. And 95% of the time, you can find me at the beach, because that's where I find clarity. That's where I find, like, my head is clear. I can listen to the waves. I take naps on the sand, like all of the things. But I had to start implementing that. And I've been doing that probably for the last 4 to 5 years, because it allows me to take that break in my schedule that's not the weekend, right? Typically, we are working Monday through Friday. We got 2 days off, and then we start all over again. But I needed an extra day, to really balance, because I do so much, beyond, the average person. And so I have to take care of myself in that way. And so that's one of the ways that I combat burnout as well, is like making sure that I have designated time every single week, and it's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
You can talk to any of my friends. They're like, do not call Kiaundra, do not text her. She will not respond on Fridays, because that is her time for her. And so that may look very differently for other people. It may look like, a nap in the middle of the day, or it may look like saying, hey, you don't have to drive yourself and work 12-hour days without taking a lunch. It's okay to take a break and eat and then come back to your work at a later time. So figuring out what that looks like will definitely alleviate burnout in a really, really powerful way. But you have to want to do it. You have to put those things in place, and you have to be consistent with it 100% of the time.
Yes, because like entrepreneurs, there's no off. It's not a 9 to 5 and you're done. It's literally you are your business. You're always on, And so how do you, avoid that? You almost have to pre-plan your breaks. Basically, you're like, this is my space, this is my weekend, so to speak, because you can't really turn off your business from you. Um, yeah. How else would you recommend entrepreneurs avoid burnout? Because I think it's easier said than done. You said consistency, and oftentimes it's like, okay, I'm going to take this break. This will be my last email. I'm not bringing my phone to this vacation or something like that. And so many people still struggle with it. And what do you have to say to them?
And to be honest, I still struggle with it too. Right?
Yeah.
Like on Friday mornings when I know it's self care day, I'm like, oh, I know there's like 40 emails that I need to look through right now, but I have to like push myself to not do that because I know that I understand that my mental health is so much more important. Those emails are going to be there, that I can get back to these people at a later time. Like we don't have to go beyond our limits because when we start going behind our limits, that's when our car starts to break down, right? That's when we have to go to the mechanic and get those things fixed and worked on instead of implementing that on a regular basis. And I think it's going to naturally be an ongoing struggle. I think that is something that is natural for most entrepreneurs. Like I will be lying if I said that I didn't have those struggles as well. But it's also something that you have to be intentional about. Like
Yes.
you have to be intentional about that because this is when we start to have physiological issues and physical issues when we are burned out. We get stress, high blood pressure, all of these things can happen and we have to take care of ourselves. We have to realize that the mind, body, and soul are interconnected. And when you neglect one thing, it definitely impacts all the others.
That's really funny because I'm wondering how much of, especially when they were doing all the studies on depression and anxiety, how much of that had been incited by burnout, right? Because when your whole systems collapse when you burn out, you can't function the same way, and I think your nervous system is basically out of whack, and therefore it would be easy to just fall into a depressive or anxiety state, and like you might be in a constant state of that because you're in perpetual burnout mode. You're never fully recovered or rested.
Absolutely. Your nervous system is in overdrive,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, and you're not giving it a break, which we know can cause so many detrimental physiological issues. And we're trying to prevent all of that, right? Like the whole goal is to prevent burnout. And so it's interesting that we want to prevent burnout, but then we do all of the things that actually burn us out. And then we get and then we get to that phase and we're like, how did I get here? And it's like, because you burned yourself out. And so I think it's an ongoing journey that a lot of us have to just do it. Like I literally remember telling you on our last call that there was a moment where I had so much work to do and I was probably working like a 14-hour day. But I literally had to stop myself, tell myself out loud and say, Kiaundra, it's okay for you to stop, take a break, and eat lunch.
Yeah.
And so I literally like closed my laptop and then, I went and had lunch. But I had to tell myself that because if not, I would have worked through lunch. I would have went a 14-hour day without really eating and probably just been snacking. That's not healthy. And so I push myself beyond limits all the time. And so I'm learning to incorporate that as much as possible because I don't want to be on the burnout end because I know once I'm burning out or once I have burned out, I'm not able to serve like I'm supposed to serve. I'm not able to help the people that I'm supposed to help to the best of my ability when I am lacking, when I am at a deficit. Like it's not going to work. And so it's important for me that I'm well so I can be able to help others as well.
And that's probably a good reminder for all those people who are listening, being like, how do I motivate myself? It's like, if you don't do it for you, do it for the people that you're trying to impact, right? Oftentimes it's like so hard to take care of ourselves, but we're so much more compassionate and able to take care of other people. So maybe that's just like that is a more intentional thing. Can you make an agreement with yourself to take this break? Hopefully you're taking it for you, but also know that it's on a grand scheme, it's affecting all the people at scale.
Absolutely. And we're more productive when we do that,
Yeah.
right? Like studies have shown that when you take breaks and come back to whatever task that you were doing, you're more productive in that task instead of trying to power through and push through and it takes an extra 5 hours when you could have literally done it in 50 minutes, you know? So it's important for us to understand that shift as well and say it's okay to take a break. I can come back to this and accomplish it probably at a faster rate than I would if I did not take this break.
There's like a diminishing effect. I definitely learned that. And then you do it in the morning, you're like, I did that in 30 minutes instead of like 3 hours. And once you learn it once, you know it works and you keep doing it.
Absolutely, 100%.
So how do relationships fit into all of this?
Yeah, is relationships are intertwined in every single thing that we do. Like we literally can't get away from relationships. And when I say the word relationships, people oftentimes think of like the romantic ones, but I'm talking about the ones that we often can't get away from. You know, family, friends, coworkers, colleagues, random people at the store, in public. Like you just can't get away from human interaction and connection. And so being able to have healthy relationships with others is key.
Yeah.
I really feel like this should be a life skill
Yeah.
that should be taught very early on, like school age, elementary age,
Yeah.
because it's so fundamental with every single thing that we do. And no one teaches us how to do it, right? We just see it modeled by our early caregivers or the people that are around us. And oftentimes they're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
Oftentimes they're showing us a blueprint of what we shouldn't be doing. And then we pick up that consciously and unconsciously, and then we pass that on to future generations. And so when we talk about healthy relationships, I always like to talk about like reciprocity and boundaries.
Right.
You know, reciprocity is making sure that whatever you are giving out to other people, you are equally receiving something in return. And I understand that all relationships, you know, that may not be, you know, all relationships that may not be the case, but you should be giving and receiving equally, right? If you're looking up and you're giving, and no one is giving to you, then I'm wondering if this relationship has reciprocity in the first place, and is it even healthy, you know, to begin with? And so we have to really dissect those relationships when people are taking from us so much to the point where it's draining us.
And that kind of leads back to burnout, because burnout isn't just from work. Burnout is your social, mental, emotional reservoir of energy. And sometimes, you know, you're giving a lot of that to your attention at work, but it's also to your relationships. And some relationships aren't, you know, healing you. They're not expanding you. They're taking and they're draining from you. And there's boundaries from every sector, boundaries with yourself, with other people, with your work. So like, yeah, nailing relationships is actually intertwined with everything. It's part of the solution and it's also part of the problem.
Yeah, 100%. You know, I talk about this concept in my book, Hard Work or Harmony, where I help people analyze if relationships are just in a difficult season or if they're at a dead end.
Oh.
And so it's important to understand the difference between the two, because relationships happen, you know, there's ups and downs, people go through things and life continues to happen. But then there's other relationships that are just not fruitful. They're not going anywhere. They haven't been going anywhere for a long time, but we don't know how to cut off relationships in a healthy way because we're so used to cutoff culture and just saying bye and, you know, leaving people without really having a conversation with them or leaving it on, you know, good terms, so to speak. And so it's okay to end relationships that are no longer serving you.
What did you call it again? So dead end or just not good for what was it again?
So it's either you have to determine if relationships are in a difficult season, or if it's just a dead end.
Or a dead end. How would you gauge that? How would you know what to do in like when you're in the midst of that with a relationship with someone?
Yeah, so difficult seasons are, I would say, seasonal. So that means, you know, someone might be going through postpartum, right? And they may not be able to be a great friend to you in that moment because they're going through their own personal thing, or they may have experienced a loss, you know, and so they're going through their own grief and they can't show up for you the way that you want, or, you know, things that are more so once this season passes, like things could potentially get back to the way that they were.
Right.
That's what I would call a difficult season.
Right.
And it goes back and forth because I might be going through something and I can't show up to be the best self, in my relationships as I would like to. And so that would be the difficult season. But I would say dead end is when it goes back to that reciprocity, right? When I have been giving so much of myself, my time, my energy, my resources, my money, my whatever it is, and I haven't been getting anything in return. And what we have to look at is patterns, right? Future behavior is determined by past behavior. So if we look up and we realize that for the last 3 years, this has been the case, and there hasn't been moments where things are getting better, then it's probably a relationship that we need to end and try to do that in the healthiest way possible without just being mean and rude and detrimental to one another. And then seeing if we can move on with that and allowing that to be a space where we can fill it in with someone who is supportive, like we talked about in, support systems.
So, okay. So getting a really good support system friend, knowing when to cut them off, what other habits or strategies would you say are good? Oh, and taking routine breaks are good for, upkeeping your mental health, your daily hygiene of preventing burnout and mental health issues.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that we didn't mention or that I would like to mention is boundaries.
Yeah.
And so boundaries is helpful in relationships, but it's also helpful for our mental health as well. Boundaries are really just those invisible lines that we set for ourselves and we set for other people. And oftentimes people don't acknowledge them. They may cross them, but it's our responsibility to set them and to keep them because what happens is we teach people how to treat us, so if you allow someone to speak to you any type of way or to say these things or do these things to you consistently without there being, a check mark in place, then they're going to think it's okay, but it's our responsibility to say no. It's our responsibility to say not at this time. It's our responsibility to say, unfortunately, I don't want to do that at this time. No, thank you. It's okay to set those markers in place. And it really does protect our own mental health because it prevents us from doing so many of the things that we really don't want to do that could potentially lead us to burnout anyway. So I know that this is a hard one for people. People don't like saying no. People don't like setting boundaries, especially when it comes to family, friends, people that you can't get away from, as I like to call it. It's hard for people to say no because they think there's going to be some major consequence and they may potentially lose the relationship. But it's okay to know that relationships can change.
Yeah.
It's okay to know that some relationships can be lost when they don't respect your boundaries and don't respect the things that you have set in place. And so just as much as you want someone to respect you, you also have to respect them as equally.
Ooh, that's a good one, right? It's like you don't just set the boundary, you got to respect the other person's boundary. It's a really tough one to even get to setting up a boundary. How would somebody do that in the most respectful and honest way? Just like give some people some hints here how to do that.
I have two ones.
Yeah.
So the first one is like you have to do it verbally, right? You can't magically, in your mind just set a boundary and you're going to think that the other person is going to, know what it is. But you have to verbally tell that person this is not okay. You can't call me at this time. You can't come to my house unexpected. You when you text me, you need to say hello first. Like whatever your boundary is, it's important for you to verbalize it to the other person. The second thing is you have to be consistent with it. Like when you go back and forth and you waver, you basically tell the other person that you're not serious.
Right.
You tell them like, oh, she just did that one time, but I can do that again if I wanted to, and she's not going to say anything about it. So the boundary setting formula that I like to give people is when you do X, I feel X. And if you continue to do X, I will have to do X, which is basically some type of consequence, you know? So if you continue to call me at 1 o'clock in the morning, I feel annoyed when you do that. So if you continue to do that behavior, I'm going to have to block your number, you
Mm,
know? And so that might seem a little harsh to some people, but sometimes you have to go to the extreme in order for certain people to understand that and then for them to get it. And then once they have really understood the concept, you might can really back in a little bit and unblock them, but still keep that boundary there as needed. So I'm not sure if that's the best example here, but basically, if you allow someone to continue to do something without it being checked, it's going to impact you. And so you want to make sure that at the end of it all, there's going to be some type of quote unquote consequence so that person can understand the severity of the matter.
a lot of people might be afraid to do like to uphold boundaries because they're afraid of losing the other person, right? What do you have to say about that?
It depends on the relationship.
Yeah.
Because if you are fearful that someone may lose you or you might lose the relationship because you set a boundary, I'm wondering if that's a healthy relationship to begin with.
Yeah.
But it also makes me think about family,
Yeah.
right? It's like you can't
Yeah.
unmother someone or uncousin them or unsibling them, you know, if there's some type of issue there. And so even if that's the case, people probably will get upset, you know, and they may not want to talk to you for a while or whatever the case may be. But that does not mean that you should not have boundaries because someone else you're fearful that someone else is going to leave you, you know, like that isn't healthy either. So there's something internally inside of you, right, that makes you feel like you have to cling on to other people when they are potentially threatening your own mental health, your own boundaries, and your own sense of burnout.
Yeah. I think that's a lot of this is kind of like interrelated. Our mental health is a lot of it is interrelated with your relationships and your ability to navigate them, like EQ and SQ, you know, social quotient, emotional quotient, all affects your RQ, resilience quotient.
Absolutely. 100%, you know, and I think we just don't want to deal with the consequences of what that could potentially look like, you know. For example, I'll give you guys a very personal example. So, my dad loves to call me back to back to back to back to back, like literally 10 times in a row if I'm busy and I don't answer. So when I see my phone and I have 10 missed calls, I automatically assume that it's an emergency or something happened, right? And so when I call him back to check in and I'm all frantic, like, hey, you know, what's going on? You know, he'll say something simple like, oh, I was at Walmart and I saw this cereal that you liked and I got it for you. You know, something that's very non-emergency like, you know, and now my nervous system is heightened and my anxiety is heightened because I just had 10 missed calls and I'm thinking something an emergency happened. So I had to tell him and set that boundary of like, you cannot call me 10 times in a row back to back because I think that it is an emergency and it makes me feel very, very anxious. And if you continue to do that, that's going to be a problem for me and our relationship is going to have to change, you know? And so he kept doing it after a while. But when I responded back to him saying, you can't do this, this is unacceptable, he realized that that wasn't a way to get a response from me, right?
Mm.
So he knows that I'm a texter. So now he'll text me first, you know, and say, hey, are you busy? And then he'll call me if I'm free, you know? So it took a while for him to understand and get that concept. But our relationship is so much better and so much healthier now because I set the boundary. He didn't like it, to be honest with you, but there was a consequence. And then we had to redirect and rearrange our relationship from there. And now we're in a better place. And so that can look very differently for other people, depending on the dynamic, the relationship, the trauma, you know, all of those things that they're dealing with interpersonally. But it serves me well to know that it's a non-emergency situation and you can text me instead of trying to call me 20 times in a row, you know? So that's a recent boundary that I have to take with
And
with my father.
and you know what to do. You study this. You help people with this. And so it's just so when you think about the scope of how many people are out there without who are dealing with their trauma and might be unaware of what's actually really going on inside of them, but also burning out. So you don't have the energy, the mental capacity, emotional capacity, the awareness. You have a breaking nervous system. To one, even have the healthy relationships and to also close off the unhealthy relationships. And it's like we keep talking about this like daily prevention is the key. And so we've kind of boiled it down to healthy relationships, reciprocity, boundaries, choosing the right people who empathize with you and make you feel safe, taking a lot of breaks and giving yourself permission to have those breaks, and to just be human, just be you, because that is how you overcome imposter syndrome, right?
Absolutely.
I love this, Kiaundra. This is amazing. I think this is a topic that we honestly don't talk enough about in the entrepreneur world or creator world at all. But now it's time to go into our hot seat questions.
Uh-oh, I'm nervous. I'm nervous.
Don't worry, they're actually not that crazy. They're not too bad. They're not too bad. You were so forthcoming already with your vulnerability. I'm like, I don't know if we can top that. But my first question is, do you believe that there is even a possibility or you can achieve balance and harmony? Actually, you talk about it in your book, right? As an entrepreneur, this is like this ever elusive state of place.
So I don't really believe in balance. And
Interesting.
so that's why I wrote a book about hard work or harmony, because when I think about balance, I think of you just trying to keep everything. It's almost like we think of a clown and they're juggling and they're trying to keep all the balls in the air at the same exact time without dropping anything. I kind of think of that analogy, but when I think of harmony and things being harmonious, it's understanding an ebb and a flow. It's understanding that in one season something might take precedent and something else has to fall back, and in another season that thing that was falling back can be in the forefront, and it's just a flow, kind of like how I'm moving right now. And it's just a lot easier to manage versus like trying to balance everything and have everything be equal all at the same time. So I believe that things can be harmonious and not necessarily centered around balance.
Ooh, I like that. So balance is equal weight on all spectrums of sides, which might not be possible for an entrepreneur. And harmonious is how everything kind of works together in a harmonious way. Some things will, it's a constant evolution, and you have to be aware of it. Essentially,
Yeah, it's like fluidity, just being fluid and saying like, oh, in this season, my mental health might be the priority and maybe some other things might have to take a little bit of a backseat. But in another season, my children might be the priority and, whatever that may be. I feel like that's not a good example. Cut that out. Because I don't want anybody thinking that their mental health can ever take a backseat. But yeah, it's about fluidity and just knowing the ebbs and flows of life, and that some things will definitely take priority over other things is really the most important thing, especially as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and someone who is a creator.
and to be aware of it. I think that's the part that people. It's a mindset shift on like one, trying to find balance, and second, only having the same darn priority, but knowing that your priority often changes, and you need to be aware of that.
Absolutely. And I think it goes back to culture, it goes back to social media, thinking that we have to balance everything. And we've used that term so much. And it's just like, it's not realistic when you think about it. Everything cannot be equal all of the time in every single season of your life. Like, that would be a complete lie if we said that it was. So, harmony is the way to go.
Amazing. Okay, so from working with all of your patients or clients that you have, what's the secret to a successful marriage and business?
You said a successful marriage and business.
Yeah.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
From working with all your clients, so after working with so many clients out there, what have you found to be the secret to a successful marriage and business?
Oh, the
The
secret.
secret sauce.
That's,
I'm looking for the secret sauce here. Everyone wants to know.
that, it's so good. That's a good one. Oh, there's so many like secret sauces that I want to say. But for the sake of time, I would definitely say the secret sauce is allowing someone to be their unique selves and not try to change them in the process.
Mm.
So oftentimes when you're in marriage, you're in a relationship, you typically in the beginning stages, in the dating early newlywedish stages, you're just like in love with the person of who they are. But then as you're with them, you're like, I don't like that about them. You need to pick up your socks. I don't like the way you chew. That all of these things start to annoy you, and we forget that they are uniquely them, and that is part of the reason why we fell in love or we wanted to be with them in the first place. So trying to change someone is always detrimental. I've seen that a million and one times because people, we naturally grow, evolve, and change, right? That's just the way human nature is. And so it's important for you that when your partner is moving towards a change or a shift in their life or a preference or whatever is different, that you evaluate that thing and you don't try to suck them and pull them back to your side, but you just allow them to evolve and be who they are meant to be.
True. Agreed. Agreed. What about a successful business?
Oh, a successful business, I would say the secret sauce to that is three things. So, consistency, like you have to be consistent. Whatever your brand is, your business is, whatever service, product you sell, whatever the case, be consistent. I see too many people are just like all over the place, wishy washy, and that really gets you nowhere. The second thing I would say is obedience. So
Mm.
I am a person of faith. And so I firmly believe that God orchestrates us and navigates our path. And it's important to be able to do what we're supposed to do and not try to run from that or, try to make our own version of that. So that is really important. And then also, too, I would 100% say accountability.
Mm.
Accountability. I would say accountability because you can't do this journey alone. There's absolutely no way. If you are, at some point, you're going to eventually need someone. And so it kind of goes back to that support system that we were talking about this whole entire time of like being accountable to someone, having someone help you navigate and to accomplish the goals, to check in on you or to check you when you are not heading in the right direction or accomplishing the goals that you want. Someone that's going to say, hey, you said you were going to do this. Why aren't you doing it? Is so important on this entrepreneur journey because we can get sidetracked and end up somewhere else that we were never meant to be in the first place.
So basically, the answer to everything is accept other people, accept yourself.
Look, it boils down
Do
to
what you say you're
accept
gonna
other
do.
people and accept yourself.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to. Yeah.
And do what you say you're gonna do.
100%. That is my pet peeve in life. I am a Virgo, so I am very perfectionistic. I am classic Virgo. And so it bothers me when people say that they're going to do things and they don't. Um, it's just important to be a woman and a man of your word because, and I think that's also from the streets, right? Like I grew up in Compton, and so we say things like word is bond, right? And so sometimes your words is all you have. And so if you can't be a man and a woman of your word, how can I trust you with anything else?
That's true. That builds trust. If you could go back in time and talk to yourself before this whole journey started, this entrepreneurial and therapist journey, what words of advice would you give yourself?
Whoo, it's a good one. There's a number of things that I would definitely tell myself. I would tell myself that it's all going to be okay because sometimes my anxiety makes me worry too much and I try to be in control over all the things. And essentially, like, God is in control. So I will tell myself that it's all going to be okay. And I will also tell myself that there will be moments where you want to quit, but there's always greater on the other side.
Mm.
So every time where I wanted to literally throw in the towel, something amazing happens, like literally the next day. Like, oh, I want to quit, and then Beyonce comes, like things of so I mean, like crazy things that I can't even tell you guys that have happened to me. And so just know that even in the moments where you want to quit and give up, like there's something great on the other side of it, and you just have to push through.
I love it because, guys, if you stick through it, you never know, you might meet Beyonce.
You never know.
You never know. All right. I love this time that we spent together chatting here, Kiaundra. So lovely to have you on this show. Thanks for coming by. And if you guys wanted to hear anything more from Kiaundra, find more about her in the link below.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a joy speaking with you, Melissa. And I hope we continue to have conversations like this moving forward.
Yeah, open conversations about vulnerability and awareness and all this kind of stuff. I love it. If you guys loved it too, click like if you want to hear more about these kinds of topics. Subscribe to our channel. But for now, I'll say bye, and I'll see you guys next week.